When the black wealth gap is 100 years behind the white wealth gap in America, it'll take 100 years to catch up.
Why do you think that's because of racism, though? You take one thing and say that is the cause for every person of color.
The data
What data? What data is saying that black people are behind? Because there are many black people that aren't behind, that are doing much better than other people.
In this video, a panel discusses whether or not affirmative action is racial discrimination. Take a look at this.
Affirmative action is racial discrimination.
There was a high school down the street from where I live in Los Angeles that encouraged all the kids of color to apply for their school play. And only once all the kids of color received whatever positions they wanted, then the white kids could apply. That, in my opinion, is an example of discrimination. The fact that we now have Harvard has black-only kids' dorms, that to me is segregation.
With affirmative action, we've seen with Harvard lawsuits and other things how it's backfiring and it's picking and choosing of which minorities can and cannot have success. It was done to try to create or make up for the wrongs of our past, but I think it's really backfired.
Yeah, it's really, excluding those excelling students in other races to fix the problems of the past, like you said. But I think the past, there were a lot of minorities that were excelling and doing really well.
Despite the foot of the government. And kudos to them.
Yes.
Incredible, strong human beings. And we shouldn't have that discrimination in any way anymore, but unfortunately it has become a discrimination against other groups.
Yeah, it's racism. It is racism. If you are taking a group of people and judging them on their race and setting them aside, giving them a special treatment, if you are uplifting a person or you are trying to suppress a person because of their race, that is racism. So we're supposed to believe that someone like Barack Obama's children are struggling because they're black? That's ridiculous. So I pulled my oldest daughter out a public school in Florida. We were having debates about pulling down statues and changing names, and some of the school board members and some of the activist groups were saying that black children could not learn because of names on buildings, and that is completely asinine to me. It basically says that because we have a higher level of melanin, somehow our brains don't work. And every other kid could walk into the building and get the education that they needed, but somehow not for you black children. And I found that to be just disgusting. And I did not want my children to have any type of idea coming from authority figures who believed in such things like that.
One of the things that we can see clearly from this video so far is that the whole conversation around racial discrimination and affirmative action and kids being triggered by the names of individuals on buildings, these things are oftentimes red herrings and or tools to push agendas. But within this conversation of affirmative action and racial discrimination and whether or not it's right and or wrong to have dormitories at Harvard University that are all black, or whether or not it's wrong to set up a class where all the black kids get through and then all the white kids, Asian kids, and Hispanic kids can apply and get into the class or whatever. These things are just evil. It's evil. But when we talk about this, it's imperative that we also think about where this country has come from. Much of what is taking place today as it relates to critical race theory and those who are still holding on to affirmative action, much of this is being done with the thought of vengeance in mind. You know, the Bible says that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, what is right, I will repay. But there are people today who are beating their chest saying, yes, now let's do to white people what was once done to black people. And it's clear that people can easily see the insanity in racial discrimination when it's being done to their people group. But oftentimes in the past, it was difficult for people to see it. Now, was it right during the Jim Crow era to tell a black person that they couldn't drink from a water fountain? No, that was evil. Was it evil to tell a black person that they had to go to the back of a store or the back of a restaurant in order to order their food, and they can't sit at a countertop or be served at a table because of their pigmentation? That was evil. But it's equally evil now to push these same ideologies upon whites in the name of leveling the playing field, or it's not spoken, but it's a silent truth that you all did this to us. Now it's time for us to do it to you. And so there needs to be a heavy dose of grace and understanding, even when these things are done, because no one wants their people group or their ethnicity to be demeaned, or for anyone to rob them of access to opportunities solely because of their pigmentation. It doesn't feel good, and that's a true sentiment across the board, that no one wants this done to their nationality and or to their ethnicity. It's evil. It was evil in the past, and today it's evil as well.
First of all, I would like to say that affirmative action programs, the biggest beneficiary according to the data, and this has been government data, has been white women first and foremost. Second of all, I would never use Barack Obama's kids as a barometer for anything, because they do have privilege as well as Will Smith kids. But if we talk about Laquan Smith down the street that nobody knows, there will be some impediments based on his race. Yeah.
Why? How do you know that?
Because people do tend to look and see race.
So now what this gentleman is now saying is that not only can white people experience privilege, but black people can experience privilege, like Barack Obama's kids. So what's the difference between Obama's kids and Laquan or Jaquan, whatever he said, down the street? All right, I believe it was Laquan. What's the difference? The difference might be that Obama and Michelle are actively engaged and involved parents taking care of their children. And Laquan may not have the privilege of having two parents in the home. So therefore, Laquan is being raised, in a home where there's only a mom there. And so there are many opportunities that Laquan might miss because, number one, he's not going to have a father in the home. And that's going to be a disaster. We know the stats on the negative outcomes of children being parented by just one parent. A child is more likely to graduate from college if there are two parents in the home, less likely to fall into a teenage pregnancy, less likely to experience depression and anxiety, so on and so forth, if there are two parents in the home. But one of the things that we miss in this whole argument of racial discrimination and privilege is the fact that having the nuclear family intact, a child coming up in the home where there are two engaged and involved parents that are moving the needle, that are working, that are serving the family, that puts a child in a different category versus a kid who has never experienced that. That needs to be mentioned.
What you were talking about is just racism, but when it's institutional and structural, it does something totally different. And when the black wealth gap is 100 years behind the white wealth gap in America, it'll take 100 years to catch up.
Why do you think that's because of racism, though? You take one thing and say that is the cause for every person of color.
The data bears that.
What data? What data is saying that black people are behind? Because there are many black people that aren't behind, that are doing much better than other people.
No, you're absolutely right. And there are outliers in every single community. There are very strong, members of the black community that are very affluent. There are also a majority that live in poverty. And if we see a bunch of cities that are majority person of color, and we're trying to recognize why have these places stayed at a very stable poverty line? But there are systemic reasons to why these communities are like that. How would you
I would say probably because of policies that are in those cities.
Racist policies, absolutely.
Hold on, we got to define terms. When would you say that Watts and Compton became the way that it is? Was it like that in the 40s and 50s?
No, it's a growth because
I'm
of the
asking
policies,
you,
from redlining policies that were enabled.
In California?
Yeah, absolutely. California put in racist policies. I would never deny that.
All of these supposed solutions are actually hurting. Wouldn't a better solution be to teach our kids that we're all born in the image of God? We should all treat one another equally. And if you're if you don't believe
then
in
all men
God,
should be
then
created
we're all
equal with certain
we're all equal, right? If you come from a poor neighborhood, whether you're black or Hispanic or an immigrant from anywhere, obviously you don't have the same privileges that somebody who comes from a wealthy community, but that has nothing to do with your color. I don't think that if you're an impoverished black kid or you're an impoverished white kid, one should receive a resource and the other shouldn't.
Would you say that it's economic then is the reason that causes these disparities?
Economic, but I don't think it's related to color.
But would you say if there's a majority of a particular group that lies underneath the poverty line in economic, race has anything to do with that?
It could, but it's just not blanket. You don't know. And why don't we look at the families, the black families, who have done those amazing things in this country and study what they did to succeed instead of just focusing on, oh, well, black people are behind and we don't even know what to do. Well, why don't we just go and look? Since you are a professor, wouldn't that be, you go and look at what has worked?
Well, I would never just go to you and just look at you. Again, and I'm sorry, it's just the reality of the data. And so what I share...
Data can be broken up in umpteen different ways.
No, it can't.
Yes, it
No,
can.
actually, I just give
You're a
the data.
professor and you're saying
That's
that
why I
data
give
cannot
data.
be manipulated?
I don't
This is why
manipulate
my
data.
kids do not go to
don't-
public school anymore.
I don't, and I'm glad they don't.
I just think it's interesting. I'm thinking of like an anecdotal story I have. Last year, the school that I taught at, Deep East Oakland, I served majority black and brown students. Over 70% of our families under the poverty line. These are some of the hardest working people I have ever seen in my life. They get up, they have 2 or 3 jobs, 3 or 4 children.
I would argue
because of their economic status,
because of liberal policies that is the government telling them that they can and cannot succeed, because of how high our property taxes are here, because we do not have school choice where they can take their dollars somewhere else. If you put those same families in redder districts in the country, like places in Florida and Texas or Virginia, where they have better options for their family, you would definitely see them be able to succeed.
And where black and brown children are still underperforming in schools.
But coming from Florida, the school that I was at, it's graded from like A to like D, F. When I started there, it was a C school. Very poor performing. And technically, sure, they have school choice. They don't have state tests anymore. But they're still so badly performing. The community of it, black, brown, very little white students in that community. But not to say that student of color can't be more affluent, but I think it's ridiculous to kind of say that color doesn't play a part into disparities and just disadvantages. So in Florida, a lot of people that I had encountered weren't kind to others, and sometimes I would have coworkers call students retarded and using racist slurs and things like that. And from my standpoint, hearing something like that, it disgusted me. My coworkers very quickly were able to kind of distinguish me from the rest. Like if I was gonna come to the teacher's lounge, more hushed conversation, people wouldn't share as much as they used to just because I would call out behavior like that.
Well, as you can see in this video, there are many conversations about racial discrimination. And everyone has their opinion about what is racial discrimination and what should be applicable, the impacts of the wealth gap in America, and yada, 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 yada. But this is the reason why I had a perfect hatred towards the Black Lives Matters movement, an organization that wanted to destroy the nuclear family. And I don't think that we talk about the impact of the nuclear family upon the economic prowess of a given people group or a family, whether it is black or whether it is white or Hispanic, right? Children deserve to have 2 parents at home. 2 incomes go much further than 1 income. And in many families, there is, quote unquote, no parent leaving the home and going to work because the government is providing all of their resources. And yes, if that is the plight of Laquan or Joanna or Marcus or Sarah, who might be in some rural part of the country who's white, Sarah, or Jaquan or Laquan, who's probably in some urban area or even rural area himself, if he only has one parent at home and the parent is not, quote unquote, working outside of the home, they're only receiving funding from the government, they are going to be disenfranchised. And the likelihood that they're going to live above the poverty line is going to be greatly decreased. And so, yes, we should support policies that incentivize the nuclear family. And we should seek to disrupt policies that incentivizes the single parent family. Now, welfare is significant in that there are people in this country who need that, okay? I don't want to cast a negative disparity upon welfare, because my mother had to use it for a certain period of time. She used it for a small time frame simply because she took upon herself another job. She didn't like the idea of her children going to a free and reduced lunch line at school. So she said, you know what, instead of me, working one job, I'll work two. And sometimes she worked 3 jobs to make sure that that wasn't our plight. But, welfare is considered to be a source for people that provides a safety net and not a hammock. When you have people who have been upon the government payroll of welfare for 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 and 25 years and sometimes 30 years, that is going to be deleterious towards the upward mobility of that family. And that's what we should fight against. We should fight against that. But we should support the nuclear family. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel. God bless you.